The Silent Twins. June and Jennifer Gibbons were born on April 11, 1963, in Barbados. When their family moved to Wales, these identical twins would become one of the most disturbing psychological mysteries ever documented. What started as childhood shyness would evolve into something far more sinister, a connection so deep it would ultimately claim one of their lives. From the moment they could speak, the twins created their own world. They developed a secret language, rapid, incomprehensible English that locked everyone else out. Teachers couldn't understand them, their parents couldn't reach them. Even their siblings were strangers to the private universe June and Jennifer had built together. At school, they were the only black students in their Welsh town. Bullied and ostracized, they withdrew deeper into their shared isolation. Their movements became synchronized, their actions mirrored, as if they were two halves of the same disturbed mind. Locals began calling them the Silent Twins. But their silence hid a darker creativity. In their bedroom, they filled notebooks with violent stories and criminal fantasies. June even self-published a novel called Pepsi Cola Addict, but their literary pursuits went unnoticed. Their fictional violence wasn't enough anymore. They needed to make it real. As teenagers, they turned to arson. They set fires, vandalized property, and terrorized their community. These weren't random acts of rebellion. They were calculated attempts to transform their dark fantasies into reality. In 1981, at just 18 years old, they were arrested. Instead of prison, they were sent to Broadmoor Hospital, a high-security psychiatric institution reserved for the most dangerous criminals. It was an extreme measure for two girls who had never directly harmed another person. But what happened next would prove the authorities had no idea what they were dealing with. At Broadmoor, doctors tried to separate them. When apart, both twins became completely catatonic, unresponsive, motionless, like their souls had been ripped away. When together, they were volatile and unpredictable. Their connection defied all medical explanations. The most disturbing discovery came from their diaries. If one twin choked, the other would react physically. If one was hurt, the other would scream in agony. Jennifer appeared to dominate June, terrifying her with an invisible control. Jennifer, in turn, felt possessed by June's presence. They both believed the same horrifying truth. One of them had to die for the other to truly live. After 11 years at Broadmoor, they were finally approved for transfer to a lower security facility. On the day of the move, something inexplicable happened. During the car ride, Jennifer became drowsy and rested her head on June's shoulder. She never woke up. Jennifer had predicted her own death days earlier. At just 29 years old, she died from sudden inflammation of the heart. There were no drugs in her system, no illness, no medical explanation. Doctors were completely baffled. June, strangely composed, told them something that chilled everyone present. "We had a deal. One of us had to die so the other could live." In the wake of Jennifer's death, June transformed completely. She spoke freely for the first time in decades, abandoned her synchronized behaviors, and was eventually released. She lived quietly, finally liberated from the psychological prison she and her sister had created. The lead masked case. On August 20th, 1966, a boy flying a kite on Morro do Vintém, a hill near Niterói, Brazil, came across something that would haunt investigators for decades. Lying in the brush were two men, side by side. They were dressed in formal suits under waterproof raincoats. Over their eyes were crude lead masks, the kind used to shield from radiation, not sunlight. They were dead. The bodies were later identified as Manuel Pereira da Cruz and Miguel José Viana, two electronics repairmen from the town of Campos dos Goitacazes. They had told their families they were leaving to buy work supplies. Instead, they traveled more than 160 miles to that remote hill where they would die under mysterious circumstances. There were no signs of violence, no blood, no injuries. Their wallets still had cash. A small notebook was found nearby. Inside was a single handwritten instruction: 1630 be at the determined place. 1830 swallow capsules. After effect protect metals await signal mask. No one knew what it meant. The men had been seen alive shortly before their deaths. Witnesses at a local bar remembered them, buying bottled water. They were calm. Miguel looked at his watch. They paid and left. No one saw them again. When police investigated, they found the scene untouched. A towel was spread neatly on the ground beneath the bodies. Near them were the lead masks, a bottle of water, and a notebook. But no capsules were found. The cause of death could not be determined. Autopsies were delayed, and by the time they were performed, the internal organs had decomposed too much for accurate toxicology tests. The masks became the symbol of the mystery. They were handmade, shaped to fit over the eyes like goggles, and likely intended to block radiation. But why would two repairmen need such protection on a remote hill? The cryptic note led to speculation that the men had swallowed something, possibly a drug, possibly poison. Some believed they were attempting to reach a higher state of consciousness. The case became stranger as more details came to light. Investigators learned that the men had been interested in spiritualism. They were part of a group that explored scientific and metaphysical ideas, including the possibility of contacting spirits or beings from other planets. One theory was that they believed they would receive a signal from a higher power. They may have expected to survive the experience, return home and share what they had learned, but they did not return, and no signal came. Locals began to speak of strange lights in the sky. There were whispers of other deaths in the area, unexplained and quiet. Some believed the men were caught in a failed ritual. Others believed they had made contact with something no one could understand. There were no fingerprints, no witnesses, no clear cause. Only two men, two lead masks, a notebook, and a hill. To this day, the lead mask case remains one of Brazil's most haunting, unsolved mysteries. Two real men, a real hill, real lead masks, and absolutely no answers. The ghost ship of the South Pacific. The MV Joita, a 69-foot wooden trading and fishing vessel, left the port of Apia in Samoa on October 3, 1955, bound for the Tokelau Islands. On board were 25 people, 16 crew members and 9 passengers, including a government official, a doctor, and a child. The trip was expected to last 2 days. The Joita never arrived. For 5 weeks there was no trace of the ship. No distress call had been sent. No debris was found. Though the weather had been rough that night, nothing suggested total catastrophe. Then on November 10th, a small trading vessel spotted the Joita over 600 miles off course, drifting in the South Pacific. It was partially submerged, but still afloat. Everyone on board had vanished. No bodies were ever recovered. No life rafts, no jackets, no crew, no passengers. Yet the vessel remained intact. The hull was sound, though badly listing. Built with a cork-lined hull, the Joita was considered nearly unsinkable. There was no sign of capsizing or sinking, so why did everyone disappear? Inside the ship, investigators found troubling clues. Blood-stained bandages were left behind. The radio was tuned to the international distress frequency, but it was damaged and had limited range. Every clock had stopped at exactly 10 and 25. A doctor's bag had been opened with surgical tools scattered across the deck. The ship's logbook, navigation gear, and cargo manifest were all missing. 4 tons of cargo were gone. The lifeboats were missing too, suggesting they had been launched. But why? The Joita was still floating, and it had a working, if limited, radio. Even with faulty equipment, a message could have been tried. No flares were seen. The sea hadn't been violent enough to explain the total disappearance of 25 people. More strange details surfaced. The engine was covered with mattresses, as if someone had tried to shield it. One engine had failed, and the vessel was operating on just one when it left Apia. Fuel lines were disconnected and a cooling pipe had broken, possibly causing overheating. Still, none of this explained abandoning ship. The Joita was unlikely to sink. She should have stayed afloat no matter what. The official inquiry reached no firm conclusion. One theory claimed a mechanical failure caused the ship to take on water. With no proper communication, the captain may have thought she was sinking. The people aboard might have panicked, but that theory doesn't hold. The crew included experienced sailors like Captain Thomas Miller, who knew the ship well. Leaving her would have defied survival protocol. Other theories pointed to piracy or foul play. Some speculated Japanese fishing crews or smugglers attacked, but there were no signs of struggle or theft, only missing documents and cargo. And to this day, not a single body has been found. The Joyita became a ghost ship, floating silently, with everything intact, except the people. The ship never sank. Someone decided to leave and no trace followed. The Glico Morinaga case. A phantom who called himself the Monster with 21 faces brought an entire nation to his knees without ever showing his face. In the spring of 1984, Japanese society faced an unprecedented form of psychological terrorism that would shake the nation's trust to its core. On March 18th, armed intruders shattered the tranquil evening of Candy Company President Katsuhisa Ezaki, dragging him from his home while his terrorized family watched helplessly. Though Ezaki managed a daring escape from his warehouse prison days later, his freedom marked not an end but a terrifying beginning. From the shadows emerged a phantom adversary who would torment an entire nation through words alone. The monster began dispatching letters dripping with mockery and menace to police and media outlets. Their demands were simple yet devastating: massive ransoms backed by threats of mass poisoning. Glico candies ever surfaced in stores, the mere suggestion proved catastrophic. Consumer confidence evaporated overnight, forcing Glico to hemorrhage millions, pulling products from shelves nationwide. The most terrifying part wasn't the poison, it was how easily fear spread without it. The monster's web of fear expanded to engulf Japan's confectionery giants, Morinaga, Marudai Ham, and House Foods. Cyanide-laced sweets appeared with chilling precision. Warning labels materialized on products, suggesting the perpetrator possessed insider knowledge and unprecedented access to room manufacturing systems. Supermarket aisles emptied as parents refused to risk their children's lives for simple treats. Production lines ground to a halt. An entire industry held its breath. The letters became psychological warfare incarnate. Each message mocked law enforcement with surgical precision. Plans shifted like smoke. Promises dissolved into threats. Retirement announcements preceded renewed terror campaigns. "We forgive Glico," read one chilling missive, only to be followed by fresh threats against Morinaga. The monster played Japan's authorities like a master puppeteer, always one step ahead, always invisible. Police launched the largest manhunt in Japanese history, deploying thousands of officers in a futile chase. The mounting pressure claimed its most tragic victim in August 1985, when Superintendent Yamamoto of the Shiga Prefectural Police chose death over failure, immolating himself in shame for his inability to capture the monster. His suicide note read, "I take responsibility for the Glico case." Then, as suddenly as they had begun, the letters ceased. The monster with 21 faces vanished into the void, leaving behind no arrests, no fingerprints, no closure. Theories swirled around disgruntled insiders and Yakuza connections, but truth remained as elusive as the perpetrator. The case remains officially unsolved to this day. Japan was left to confront an uncomfortable reality. This was not mere blackmail, but corporate terrorism of the highest order. The monster with 21 faces had weaponized trust itself, disappearing into legend while leaving behind a legacy of fear, shame, and haunting questions that remain unanswered. The Max Headroom Incident. A rubber mask and 30 seconds of chaos created one of television's greatest unsolved mysteries. November 22nd, 1987, Chicago. Evening news on WGN-TV is interrupted. The screen goes black, then a figure appears, a man wearing a rubber Max Headroom mask. Behind him, a sheet of metal waves back and forth to mimic the digital background of the TV character. There's distorted, buzzing audio. He speaks in glitchy nonsense, mocks sportscaster Chuck Swirsky, blurts out phrases from old commercials, then the screen cuts back. It lasts less than 30 seconds, but this was only the beginning. Later that night it happens again. This time during an episode of Doctor Who on WTTW, the PBS affiliate, but now the intruder gets nearly 2 full minutes. He laughs, groans, spouts cryptic phrases. "My brother is wearing the other glove," he says. He hums the theme from Clutch Cargo, shouts about nerds, pulls down his pants, and gets spanked on the bare bottom with a fly swatter by someone off screen. Then it cuts. Silence. The most sophisticated signal hijacking in broadcast history was pulled off by a ghost. No one ever claims credit. The stations didn't authorize it. Engineers are baffled. FCC agents and the FBI get involved. Signal hijacking is a federal offense, but even with all their resources, they find nothing. The hijacker used powerful equipment to override the signal from a remote location. It was done with precision, suggesting technical expertise, maybe even access to the broadcast towers. But there's no trail, no fingerprints, just a distorted, masked face laughing into the void. Speculation runs wild. Some believe it was an inside job by a rogue station tech. Others think it was a political statement or performance art. A few claim the broadcast contained hidden messages or was linked to underground groups. Decades later, nothing has been proven. The Max Headroom incident became a piece of tech folklore. It was eerie, chaotic, and deeply strange. The digital world hadn't fully arrived yet, but this felt like a glitch from the future, a warning, or maybe just a joke pulled off with terrifying brilliance. No one knows who did it. No one ever will. The darkness that never ends. These 5 rabbit holes share something that makes them more disturbing than any fictional horror story. They're real. The rabbit holes are still there, waiting. The question is, are you brave enough to take them down?